Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's Liam from Solitude here, and today I'm going to be going through what I believe are the top 10 Australian albums from the 1990s. So in this video, I'm just kind of going to go for it. It's a me talk at the screen sort of video. I'm just going to say what I think about a bunch of albums from the 1990s that are Australian that I really like. I'm going to order them in a top 10, and I'm also going to give you some honorable mentions at the end. I'll also do a little short form snippet, sort of shorts video version of this later on too. If you only just want to see the top 10, wait for that one to come out. But you might have seen some of my other videos about this, the top 10 Australian songs from the 2000s and 2010s. Of course, I needed to get to the 90s, and I want to get to the 80s and 70s later on too. But the 90s was an awesome decade for music. We obviously had the underground and mainstream flip, which happened in the early 90s with the Nirvana and grunge boom in America, in Seattle. And Australia was, we followed along with that. We had a lot of underground success stories in the 90s, which I'll be talking about in this video a bit here. So obviously with all my videos that are about lists, it's always going to be difficult to come to a common consensus, and there's always going to be some subjective bias and opinion in there. But I try to make my lists what I believe are a common consensus, and it's up to you to decide if you agree with that or not. So you can put it in the comments. If you think I'm wrong, that's cool. Put them in the comments and we can have a chat about it. I've got copies of most of these. My number 10 album is self-titled Baby Animals' debut record. Now, this album is a rock and roll record. It's one with blaring guitars, bashing drum beats, and, it's everything that you would love about that sort of kind of like rock and roll, pub rock, Australian sort of feel. I mean, look at that cover. It looks just like it sounds. The Baby Animals were an interesting group, actually, because in the early 90s, when they broke out, they actually had a bit of international success as well. They won some ARIAs, I believe. And, this album was a huge success all over Australia and some parts of the world too. So, and I guess it was just because they wrote great songs, and Susie DiMarchi, the lead singer, what an awesome front woman. She was kind of setting herself apart, being a female front person in a male-dominated era in that rock and roll scene of the early 90s. She could really hold her own against all the guys out there. So, but yeah, songs on here that are big that you probably would know would be One Word. What a catchy chorus. One word, one letter, one line. I feel at home, but great song. What else we got? Rush You, the opening track, gets in with, a big bang. It's a big hype up song. And the other big one on here was Early Warning. Another big one, second track. Oh, and Painless. More of like their kind of ballady song. But, all round, an awesome album. Number 10 from the 90s. And yeah, Baby Animals, self-titled. You should check it out if you haven't already. Okay, moving on. My number 9 album, Savage Garden, self-titled. Now, this was a heavyweight commercial success in Australia and overseas. So, again, kind of like Baby Animals, this was a breakout success for them. It put them on the map around the world, won the ARIAs, won the hearts of the Australian public. And yeah, a lot of these songs still get played on commercial and, even rock radio. Even though this was more of a pop album, it, kind of had that crossover success where there was a lot of kind of your elitist rock fans who actually kind of got into this. So yeah, they managed to cross over genres and cross over fan bases really well. Some of the big moments that you'd know from this album would be To the Moon and Back, the first song. That's probably my favorite from this album, if I got to say. It's probably like the most rock song on here. It's gentle, but it's a banger. Got some nice guitars on there. What else we got? I Want You, which is kind of like that dance floor pop song. I think it got voted into the hottest 100 Australian songs of all time recently. which aired on Triple J, which I was all over if you would follow my channel. What else have we got on here? Truly, Madly, Deeply, the big ballad. Of course, that was probably the biggest song on this album, and it's a beautiful song. It's a wonderfully written song. I get why it was popular. I get why it had a lot of crossover success, and it's one of those ones where people would, you could sing the chorus. People recognize it now. It's the sort of song you could play at a wedding or an event or something like that. Yeah, it's one. I think it even gets sung at like English football games sometimes. I've seen a video on YouTube of the fan group singing that song in regards to something to do with their team. So yeah, awesome song. But yeah, look, this album really put them on the map. They had another couple of releases, maybe one other or two other albums after this one. I'm not a Savage Garden aficionado. I have to admit. But they're kind of a sad story because they did break up. It was a duo, obviously, Darren Hayes, and I can't even remember the other guy's name. Darren Hayes was the front man, the singer, and went on to do some solo stuff. The other guy who did the guitar and I suppose composed a lot of the music, I think they had like a bit of a falling out or something. I'm not sure what actually happened there, but they've never got back together for many years now, and the times I have heard Darren Hayes talk about Savage Garden, he's kind of negative sometimes. So yeah, it's kind of a sad story, but still an awesome album from the 90s, from Australia. Savage Garden, self-titled. Alrighty, number 8. I don't actually have a copy of this album, so I'm just going to talk about it. But it's The Boatman's Call by Nick Cave. Now, okay, this one I know will get some people talking in the comments because I've heard some people say to me before in my comment section, Boatman's Call is not Nick Cave's best album, or Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, should I say. In fact, it's. I mean, he's released a lot of albums, so I've had a number of his other albums brought to my attention. I think Murder Ballads is one that people say they think is the best. But look, again, I've got to admit, I'm not a Nick Cave aficionado. I like his music. I like what he does, but I haven't listened to all of his albums. I'm going to admit that, okay? But I have listened to The Boatman's Call, and I know a lot of people put this high up in their greatest Australian albums lists, and some of the songs in particular are just incredible. And in particular, I'd have to say Into My Arms. It's an amazing song, a beautiful piano ballad, and it really paints a picture for where the whole album was kind of going and where Nick Cave was kind of at. He wanted to strip it back. He wanted to do something more intimate, something more about, just him and piano, vocals and piano on a lot of the songs. And it just works. It just shows how good of a songwriter he is when everything is stripped back. And that's what I really appreciate about The Boatman's Call more than his other albums. Yes, I love the fact that he's super experimental and zany and weird with a lot of other albums and music he puts out. And I know there's some really great stuff out there, but I can't go past The Boatman's Call, and I know a lot of other people can't. And I feel like it's his best work musically, even though I haven't listened to all of his other stuff, admittedly. But what I've read about it, and what I have digested of his other music, I've listened to a couple of the other albums and many of the other songs. I think it's his best, and I think it's in the top 10 Australian albums of the 1990s. Alrighty, moving on. Number 7. Personal favorite of mine, but it's one that I believe deserves to be in here. It's Slightly Odd Way by Jebediah. Now, this album is an excellent piece of Australian indie rock music. When it came out, it was the late 90s, 1997. There was a big scene of this sort of music. How I would describe it, let's say it was kind of like wacky party rock in a way, a little bit like a festival-friendly, jump up and down, rock music with big guitar choruses, jangly rhythms in the verses usually, and usually something to do with like a nasally thick Australian accent, singing about something, maybe relatable for young Australians, something to do with, growing up in your hometown, having fun at parties, maybe smoking pot, getting drunk, things like that. A lot of bands were doing that sort of thing in the late 90s, and Jebediah were one of the best at it, in my opinion. They're a Perth band, which is where I'm from, so I do have a little bit of bias. But this album, I just think, start to finish, bang, 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 the whole way through. Every song on here is awesome. Of course, we've got to point out the highlights. First song on here, Leaving Home. One of my personal favourite Australian songs of all time. It's just such an awesome chorus. That chorus just hits hard. I also love Harpoon, the more ballad experience on there, where they still bring the kind of Jebediah feel, so it's still a little, jump up and down at times, but at the same time, they're able to go through this really nice story about a heartbreaking end to a relationship. So, yeah, very interesting because I love the fact they're able to kind of capture the innocence of their youth, because they were very young when they wrote the songs on this album, but they were still able to do it in a way that wasn't immature, which is really difficult to do. And I think it's oftentimes when bands are able to do that, it usually is their first album, and you'll often see it's when in the long run, you'll see like a band, their first album is their best and it's the most appreciated, and then after that, they don't really hit as hard as their first album. And I think there's something special about that. I think that's what Jebediah were able to do as well. They were really at their peak when they were in their early 20s, late teens, and they hit it with this one. Some other moments on here that I really like. Benedict is a great song at the beginning too. What else have we got? Teflon, Military Strongman, singles on here were all bangers. And yeah, great album from Australia, 90s. All right, next up, we're up to number 6. UMI with Hourly Daily. Now, this song was the Muso's album of the decade, in my opinion. Australian music nerds loved UMI in the 90s, and what they were able to achieve here with Hourly Daily was a huge success. Something that UMI were kind of tapping into in the early days of the 90s was the Australian feel to their albums and their music. They were kind of just like dipping their toes in it early on with some of their early work, but when they came out with Hourly Daily, this is when they really perfected it, and the whole album is an experience about life in the Australian suburbs, as the cover kind of suggests. I mean, look at that; it's beautiful. That's just Australian suburbs right there. And this is Tim Rogers' best songwriting, in my opinion. He's the lead singer and songwriter from UMI. He's never really been one to be a great vocalist, but his lyrics, I think, make up for it. He's able to describe Australian culture and Australian suburbs better than anyone at the time of this album. It's up there with kind of like Paul Kelly, people like that, in my opinion. And yeah, some really beautiful songs on here. The opening track, Hourly Daily, and title track, beautiful beginning, beautiful song. What else we got? Mr. Milk, Soldiers. I love these two songs. Really get the album going. Good Morning, second track. Perfect way to get the ball rolling. Yeah. Well, there's just like a lot of good songs on here. The whole album is a great experience to listen through, start to finish. If you just want to, get some Australiana feel into your life, Hourly Daily by UMI is the go-to for that. All right. Number 5. Got to get these guys in here. Living End, self-titled debut album. Awesome experience to get through. Now, the Living End, I've spoken about them a few times on my channel, but what I really respect about them was that they were able to kind of like make a genre out of nowhere, kind of. I mean, there may have been some other people doing it around, but these were the guys who made it popular. These were the ones who broke through with it. So what they did was like this merge of rockabilly and punk, which obviously you could call punkabilly. Some other people called it psychobilly, but it was kind of like the Stray Cats meets Green Day. And, you know, that's a really weird combination when you think about it back then, but it worked, and it worked so well. And I think the reason why it worked so well was because of how good of musicians the guys in this band were. Chris Chaney on the guitar, in my opinion, he's my personal favorite Australian guitarist. He's just an incredible musician, and he works that guitar better than any Australian, in my opinion. You know, he's up there with like the Angus Youngs and all that. And the bass player, I can't remember his name. I feel like his first name's Scott. I'll have to get those people in the comments to tell me. But he plays the double bass, which is unique, but works really well with rockabilly. But man, he smashes it. The bass lines in this album are just so good. The drummer here, he didn't stick around, but you know, he does a lot of good work on this album. So yeah, later on, he leaves the band, new guy comes in, but his work here was really good too. So obviously some of the moments that you're going to recognize from this album and some of the best songs are Prisoner of Society, their biggest song, the breakout hit. Second Solution was also the big hit. Those two songs were on a single together. Like back in the day when you had to like buy the CD as a single, you could buy the single and it had Prisoner of Society and Second Solution on it. That like held some record, I think, for ages, where it was like the most bought single for so many weeks, and it held a record. It might still hold the record. I'm not sure, because you know, people don't really buy singles anymore. But anyway, those two songs were re-recorded for this album. Actually, if I'm being honest, I actually think I prefer the original recordings to the re-recordings. The re-recordings feel a bit cleaner, which is fine for the album. But yeah, those original recordings, there's something dirty and nice about them, which I really love. What else? West End Riot, Growing Up, Falling Down, All Torn Down, one of their slower songs, but you know, works really well. I just think it's great. The whole album is cohesive. It's a great experience. Get through the whole thing and bang, your ears will be bleeding, but they'll be bleeding in joy because it sounds so loud and so good at the same time. Living End, self-titled. All right. Number 4. I've got to reach down for my vinyl. I've only got this one in vinyl, but it's Crowded House, Woodface. Now, I love Crowded House. Crowded House was one of those bands where they're one of those bands that your parents played them, you know? I remember my parents, we had the CD of their best of album called Recurring Dream. It's a weird album cover with like a guy that was like blue with his shirt off on it. And that was my introduction to Crowded House. We would play that album in the car when we'd drive around, especially on long road trips. Sometimes we'd have to drive an hour away to go and see my grandparents, and that album would be playing all the time. So I feel like I know the songs on that album like the back of my hand. Later on in life, when I was delving more into their work, I was able to listen to their albums each at a time, and this one is my favorite of theirs. Their self-titled is also awesome too, which came out in the 80s. But there's something special about this one. The songwriting on here is immaculate. I think I love the fact that Neil and Tim Finn joined together for this album. I think it's the only album they technically did together for Crowded House. And yeah, their voices together are just so good. Like, the songs on here that work really well for me. Fall at Your Feet, obviously one of my favorite songs of all time. It's Only Natural. Oh man, the harmonies on that. You got to listen to the harmonies. So good. Weather With You, obviously. Some of the deeper cuts, Whispers and Moans. Don't know if you've heard that song before, but man, good song. Yeah, look, it's just an awesome song. I know I'm still going to get the people out there who are going to say, this is not an Australian band, they're a New Zealand band. I've had this discussion probably 50 times now online with people where I quite clearly can explain how Crowded House are an Australian band. Okay, let me start off with the obvious. Yes, Neil Finn. He's a Kiwi, okay? He's got a Kiwi accent. He grew up in New Zealand. He spent most of his time there. Still spends a lot of time there. I think he lives in Australia now, though. But Split Ends, his first band with his brother Tim, was a New Zealand band who moved to Australia. Crowded House was formed in Melbourne by Neil Finn and two other Australians. Okay? So it's an Australian band with a guy who was born in New Zealand, who was living in Australia at the time, and formed a band with two other Aussies. Okay? So they are an Australian band. If you don't think they're an Australian band, you basically are saying that AC/DC are an Australian band because Bon Scott was born in Scotland, or Men at Work are not an Australian band because Colin Hay was born in Scotland. Okay, it's the same argument. So stop going with that argument. They're an Australian band. Okay, this is an awesome album. Check it out. Right, number 3 is Internationalist by Powderfinger. I've also got this one on vinyl. So there it is. Beautiful. The reissue when it came out a few years ago. Got it right here. Okay. My personal favorite Powderfinger album. I think this one's better than Odyssey. But Odyssey was more popular. But this one to me is more cohesive. The songwriting's better. And I just like the songs on it more. So it's my personal favorite. Some of the songs on here were written in response to Pauline Hanson and some of the stuff she was coming out with in the 90s. And The Day You Come was kind of like the call to that, talking about kind of what was going on in Australia, just some of the discussion around some of the things happening. And yeah, they were able to articulate it really well. And they were able to do it in a way where I feel like it wasn't being shoved down your throat as well, which is really tough to do, if I'm being honest. They were able to kind of just make it subtle and thought-provoking, which was really cool. Some of the other moments on here that I love. Hindley Street, however you say it. Great opening track. Belter, the second song. Man, that's a banger. And Passenger. Great Powderfinger song. Look, this is an awesome album. You got to listen to it all the way through. It's quite cohesive. The guitars, the drums, everything on here is really good. And yeah, check it out. Powderfinger Internationalist. All right, back into it here with number 2. And for number 2 on the top 10 Australian albums of the 1990s, I've gone with Regurgitator Unit. Here's my CD. And also, here's my vinyl. So, usually people would point to the yellow cover, which is the traditional color, but I think they offered 4 different color variants: blue, I think red and green as well, maybe, with the other options. So you could choose the color you wanted when you bought the CD. But most of the vinyls I've seen are the yellow, so that's usually the one. I think if you go on Spotify, it's the yellow cover. But where do I start with this album? It is such a good album. I love this album back to front, first song to last. It's just awesome. It's super experimental. It meshes a lot of genres together. It's able to kind of give social commentary for the time, the late 90s there, where the internet and technology was starting to kind of come in and have a bit more of a presence on the media and the music industry. There's some of the songs on this that I love. The first song, I Like Your Old Stuff Better Than Your New Stuff, which is very clever that they're able to say that about themselves, knowing that some people would probably say that about this album because it is a little bit of a direction shift for them. Their earlier stuff was a little heavier, and this is more kind of pop and artsy, if you might say. Then I also love the next track, Everyday Formula, which is probably the heaviest song on this album, but it's a banger nonetheless. What else? Can't go past exclamation mark, the song formerly known as. That song was voted in the hottest 100 Australian songs of all time. It's probably the best Regurgitator song, the most well-known of theirs. An absolute dance floor party anthem. What a song. And Polyester Girl was probably the other big single on here that you might know of. Got a lot of airtime on radio and rage and video hits and stuff like that, with a very interesting video clip that went along with it. But yeah, look, this album, I think it's still great to this day. It's aged really well. It's got a lot of respect. I think it won the RAF of Best Album the year it came out. It's a personal favorite of mine, number 2 on my list. Okay, which brings us to number 1. Now, if you haven't guessed it already, you're obviously missing it, or you don't follow Australian music that much. But in my opinion, the number 1 album from the 90s from Australia is easily Silverchair's Frog Stomp. Now, this album is, quite a story. I've said it multiple times on this channel. I'm willing to say it again. The story goes like this. 3 teenage boys from Newcastle get together in their parents' houses and make some amazing grunge rock reminiscent of that 90s Seattle sound. They win a competition with SBS and Triple J, where their single Tomorrow is chosen to be the song that gets an official professional recording done, and that song turns out to be a hit. They re-record that song and a bunch of others for this album for their debut, Frog Stomp, with Kevin Caveman Shirley, a well-known producer. And wow, for a bunch of 15-year-old kids, the music on this album is incredible. It's extremely mature for their age. The lyrics, they're not that deep, but they're very poetic and at times dark and mysterious and interesting. The guitar work for a 15-year-old Daniel Johns is really good. The drum work from Ben Gillies is extremely good, in my opinion. He's a very good drummer, and when he was 15, he was, probably better than most drummers that we hear now on commercial Australian radio or playlists or whatever on Spotify. So if I had to criticize this album, though, I probably would say it is a little heavy on the gain. And I guess that was just kind of sign of the times, the mid-90s there, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, all that sort of grunge stuff. Very high gain guitars was popular, and it really does kind of sound like it comes from that era, and that hasn't really aged as well. A lot of rock music now doesn't have as heavy a gain. But hey, if you're looking for that, and if you just feel like going back into the 90s and you feel like, experiencing some really heavy guitars, then this is an album for you. And, if that doesn't bother you, you're going to love this album. So obviously some of the songs on this that I love and that are most well known would be Tomorrow, the lead single. What an awesome song, an epic track. What else? The first song on the album, Israel Sun. What a bass line to start off with. Man, that is such a good song to kick it off. Where else do we go? Pure Massacre was the other biggish single from here. And you know what? Like Shade, I think is a really good song too. It's probably the lighter one of the lightest songs on here, but it hits really hard, especially when that heavy ending comes in. But yeah, look, Silverchair, arguably the biggest band from the 90s in Australia. They had other great albums that came out in this decade too, but this debut of theirs is the one that still gets the most love and attention, I believe. It's got the most youthful energy of all their albums because it's the one they put out when they were the youngest. And yeah, it's a great experience, and it put them on the world stage as well. They were touring with the Red Hot Chili Peppers and, you know, other bands from that sort of era when this came out, and yeah, they were big in America as well. So there you go. That's my 10. But as I mentioned before, I'd like to bring up some honorable mentions. Some of the ones that I have in my collection: CDs. I've got some vinyls too, but CDs are just kind of easier to pick up and put on the screen. Guide to a Better Living by Grinspoon. Similar sort of thing to Silverchair here. They actually won the first Triple J Unearthed competition, which was born out of the competition that Silverchair won. So this band were from Lismore, which is in New South Wales, country town, and their song that won them the competition was Sickfest, which is a brutal sort of new metal heavy rock song, really heavy on the guitars and the gain there as well. That song was one of the most requested of the year on Triple J, from what I've heard, and yeah, really put them on the map. This was the album that they included it on as their debut. It was on some other material that they put out before as well. But yeah, these songs are just youthful energy again, and they just sound good. Some of the big ones: Dead Cat 3 times, or DC times 3. Just Ace is kind of like a little pop punk song, but it's awesome too. Yeah, if you love your heavy stuff, early Grinspoon, it's got you going. All right, what else we got? Killing Heidi, Reflector. They're also another band that won Triple J Unearthed, actually, in the 90s. And their debut album that they brought out was huge. It was everywhere, got commercial attention as well. Every time I hear the two big songs on this album, Weir and Mascara, it instantly reminds me of what it was like to be a kid in that kind of 1999, 2000, 2001 era. I just remember, you know, being in the car with my parents and those two songs being played on the radio all the time. For some reason, they really stick out to me. I feel like they really embody the sound of that millennium, turn of the millennium, Y2K Australian era. I just think of Ella Hooper with the dreadlocks, and yeah, this album kind of still stands out as one that captures that late 90s feel extremely well. We spoke about UMI earlier, but the album they brought out before Hourly Daily, Hi-Fi Way, is also a brilliant piece of work. They obviously do tap into that Australiana thing a bit here, not as much, but still some great music on here, and they're kind of like jangly alternative rock, post-grunge stuff that they put out is at some of its best here. Some people would probably say that this is their best album. I personally think Hourly Daily is their best, but this one's also up there. A lot of people rate this as one of the best Australian albums, but didn't make my top 10 because I put Hourly Daily in, but yeah, it's a great one. It's probably, you know, in the top 20 for the 90s, in my opinion. All right, we spoke about Silverchair earlier, and their other two albums, Freak and Neo Ballroom, which both came out in the 90s. Silverchair were just massive in the 90s, the biggest Australian band in the 90s, easily. But yeah, their three 90s offerings were all great albums, in my opinion. Frog Stomp was the youthful energy. Freak Show, their second album, with the song Freak on it, that was the biggest song, obviously, was like the I am so sick of being treated this way now that I'm famous, angsty energy. And Neon Ballroom was the depression and anorexia album, unfortunately, for Daniel. He went through a lot. He took over full songwriting reins, and he went through some brutal stuff, and this was the product of it. This is personally my favorite Silverchair album. I know that's a very divisive statement, and I know a lot of people see this album as Silverchair moving away from their kind of grunge rock roots and the beginning of the end for some people. But I like this album because of the emotional pull in it, and I like the lyrics a lot, and I like how I feel like it's the best of both worlds for Silverchair. You've got the grunge elements in there still with, Emotion Sickness and Paint Pastel Princess and songs like that, but then you've got the art rock elements in there too. I mean, with those two songs, you can just say that they both have really heavy guitars and chuggy rhythms, but they also have string arrangements, which is kind of crazy to think about. But you would, if you follow Silverchair, you would know their next album, Diorama, which came out, was a lot more on the strings heavy side. It was a lot more artsy, and this was them kind of pointing towards it. Anna's song is also beautiful on here. What a beautiful piece of work. And Miss You Love. I love that song too. All right, Whitlam's Eternal Nightcap. Big success in the late 90s, particularly with their song No Aphrodisiac. Not a huge Whitlam's fan, to be honest. I've never really been into that sort of like piano ballad, folk rock as much, but I appreciate them, and I appreciate what they did here on this album and some of their bigger songs. It went to number 1 on the Hottest 100, obviously, of 97. The No Aphrodisiac, that song. And yeah, this one goes down as a classic because of that. Last one in my collection that I want to mention doesn't normally get brought up as much as I think it should, but Diesel with Hip Fidelity. I think it's because people kind of associate Diesel with the 80s, but this album actually did technically come out in the 90s. I think it was 91, if I'm correct there. I can stand to be corrected in the comments if you know. But man, when Diesel went solo, away from his project, Johnny Diesel and the Injectors, and he brought this album out. Does this hit hard in that blues soul rock niche? Bang, yes it does. This is an awesome album. Some absolute classics that you still hear on, rock radio, shopping centers all the time. You've got your Tip of My Tongue, what a song, classic. What else is on here? Oh, Love Junk, Come to Me. Awesome guitarist, awesome singing. What an artist. Diesel from the 1990s, Hip Fidelity. That's all in my collection. I might flash up some others that are worth an honorable mention on the screen, just by word right now. If you think I missed any others that need a mention, chuck them up in the comments and we can discuss it. But thanks for tuning in to this video and checking out my channel. If you want to see more stuff about Australian music, please feel free to like and subscribe and come back for more later. And I hope I will see you soon. Thanks, bye.